The rain hadn't started yet, but the air already felt heavy enough to break. Tử Tiên stood still at the edge of the village path, her fingers tightening slowly around the basket she was holding. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something far more painful, as her eyes locked onto the scene just ahead. Jack, standing under the shade of a large tree, talking, laughing, with another woman. Not just talking. Close. Too close. The woman stood slightly leaning toward him, her hand lightly touching his arm as she spoke, her smile confident, her voice soft enough that Tử Tiên couldn't hear, but didn't need to, because what she saw was enough. Jack didn't notice her. He was focused on the conversation, his expression relaxed in a way Tử Tiên hadn't seen in a while. Not since things had become difficult, not since they had struggled day by day, not since life had turned into survival instead of peace. And that hurt more than anything, because she wondered when was the last time he looked at her like that. The woman laughed again. Light, carefree, different from the quiet strength Tử Tiên carried every day, different from the life they had built, different from everything. Tử Tiên took a small step back. The world around her blurred slightly, not because something changed, but because something inside her did. So you're really staying here? The woman asked, tilting her head slightly as she studied Jack. Jack nodded. Yes. She smiled. You could have had everything. Jack let out a small breath. I already do. The words were simple, but the tone soft, warm, and somehow, that made it worse. Because Tử Tiên didn't know if those words were meant for her anymore. Her grip loosened. The basket slipped slightly. A faint sound. Jack turned. Their eyes met. And in that exact moment everything froze. Because what Tử Tiên felt was not anger, not even jealousy. It was something deeper, something quieter, something that didn't need shouting to destroy everything. Dean. Jack frowned slightly, confused. When did you? She didn't answer. Didn't move closer. Didn't even ask. Because sometimes, the moment you see something, you don't need explanations anymore. The woman beside Jack followed his gaze, then smiled faintly. So this is her, she said softly. Tử Tiên chest tightened. Jack immediately shook his head. Wait, this isn't. But he didn't finish. Because Tử Tiên had already turned and walked away. Dean. Jack called out, stepping forward quickly. But she didn't stop, didn't look back. Her steps were fast, unsteady, but determined. Because if she stopped, she might break. Jack hesitated for half a second, just half a second, then turned back. I'll talk to you later, he said quickly to the woman. She didn't stop him, didn't call after him. She just stood there, watching, a faint smile on her lips, because everything was going exactly as planned. By the time Jack reached the house, she was gone. The door slightly open, the room empty, too empty. Tien, he called out. No answer. His chest tightened. Something was wrong, very wrong. On the small wooden table there was nothing. No note, no message, no explanation. Just silence, an absence. Jack stepped outside again, looked around. The path, the trees, the fading light of evening slowly turning into darkness. She wouldn't just leave, he muttered. But deep down he knew. Something had happened. Something he didn't understand. The sky darkened completely. The first drop of rain fell. Then another. Jack stood in the middle of the yard, his mind racing, trying to piece together the moment, the look in her eyes, the silence she left behind. That girl. He turned instantly. The realization hit. Hard. Cold. Clear. Back in the city. In a quiet room filled with soft light and controlled elegance. Jack's mother sat calmly, a phone in her hand, her expression unreadable as she listened. It worked, a voice said from the other end. A small pause. Then, she saw them together. His mother closed her eyes briefly, not out of relief, but calculation. Good. She opened them again. Cold. Precise. Now we wait. Back in the village, the rain began to fall harder. Jack was already running. Through the path. Through the mud. Through the darkness. Because now he understood. And if he was right, then he had already lost her. Far ahead. A small figure walked alone under the rain. No umbrella. No direction. Just moving. Because staying was no longer something she believed she could do. Tien wiped her face. But she didn't know if it was rain or tears. The rain came down harder, each drop striking the ground like a quiet echo of everything breaking inside them, as Jack ran without stopping, his shoes sinking into the mud, his breath uneven, his chest burning, not from the distance but from the fear that he might already be too late. T'es utile. His voice cut through the storm, but the wind swallowed it. Again. 10. This time louder. Desperate. And somewhere ahead. She stopped. Just for a second. Tien stood there in the middle of the narrow path, rain soaking through her clothes, her hair clinging to her face, her hands trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from everything she had been holding back since that moment. She didn't turn around immediately, because she knew if she did, she might not be able to leave. Jack finally caught up, slowing down only when he was just a few steps behind her, his chest rising and falling heavily, his eyes fixed on her back as if afraid she would disappear if he blinked. Tin, wait! His voice broke slightly. She closed her eyes, then slowly turned, and when he saw her face, everything inside him collapsed. Tears mixed with rain, pain he didn't understand, silence he didn't deserve. What happened? He asked, stepping closer, his voice softer now. Why did you leave? She looked at him. For a long moment, as if searching for something. An answer. A truth. Or maybe just a reason to stay. Who is she? She asked quietly. Jack froze. What? The girl, she said, her voice barely steady. The one you were with. Jack shook his head immediately. No, Tin, listen, it's not what you think. I saw everything. She cut him off, her voice rising slightly for the first time. You were laughing. Talking like nothing else mattered. That's not. Then what is it? She demanded, her eyes finally breaking, the tears no longer held back. Tell me what I'm supposed to believe. The question hit harder than anything else. Because it wasn't anger. It was hurt. Deep. Real. And Jack felt it. Every part of it. She's not who you think she is, he said quickly. She came from the city. Of course she did. Tien let out a bitter laugh. That's where you belong, isn't it? No. Jack stepped forward. That's exactly what I left. But she didn't, Tien replied, shaking her head. She still has everything you gave up. Everything I could never give you. Jack stopped. As now he understood. This wasn't just about what she saw. It was about what she felt. About the distance between their worlds. About the fear she never said out loud. Tien, his voice softened, but she stepped back. Don't, she said. The word quiet, but firm. I don't want to hear things that will just make this harder. That sentence cut deeper than anything else, because it meant she had already started letting go. The rain fell harder. The space between them felt wider, even though they were only a few steps apart. Jack's hand slowly dropped to his sides. For the first time since chasing her, he didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. His words felt useless. Then suddenly he moved. Not forward, but down, kneeling, right there, in the mud, in the rain, without hesitation. Tien's eyes widened. Jack, what are you doing? I'm sorry. His voice was low, but clear. I'm sorry I didn't see what this would look like. She froze. I'm sorry I let you see something that hurt you this much, without being there to explain it. The rain ran down his face, but he didn't move, didn't stand, because this wasn't about pride anymore. I didn't do anything wrong with her, he continued. But I did something wrong with you. Her breath caught. I didn't protect how you would feel, he said. And that's on me. Silence. Heavy. Raw. Real. She's someone my mother sent, Jack added finally. To break us. Tien's eyes trembled. What? I didn't know at first, he admitted. But I do now. The pieces began to connect. The timing. The way the girl spoke. The feeling. Everything. And you believed it? Jack asked softly. That I would throw everything away. For someone like that? Tien didn't answer. Because the truth was, she didn't want to believe it. But in that moment, she had. Jack lowered his head slightly. "If you still want to leave," he said quietly, "I won't stop you." The words hurt to say, but he meant them. "Because I don't want you to stay out of doubt." The rain softened slightly, as if the world itself paused, waiting. Tu Tian stood there, looking at him, kneeling, soaked, still. Not as the man he used to be, not as someone powerful, but as someone who chose to stay, chose her. Again, slowly, she stepped forward, one step, then another, until she stood right in front of him. Her hand lifted, hesitated for just a second, then gently touched his shoulder. "Stand up," she whispered. Jack looked up. Their eyes met, and in that moment something fragile started to mend. "I believe you," she said softly. The words were there, but not complete, because her eyes still held something. Pain, lingering, unhealed. Jack stood slowly, carefully, as if afraid the moment would break. "I won't let this happen again," he said. Tu Tian gave a small nod, but didn't smile. Not yet, because forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. They stood there, in the rain, closer now, but not the same, because something had changed. Something had been tested, and though it didn't break them, it left a mark. In the distance, thunder rolled softly, a reminder that storms don't always end after the rain. And somewhere far away, Jack's mother looked out into the night, her phone still in her hand, her expression calm, almost satisfied, but not fully. "Did it work?" the voice asked. She paused, then answered quietly, "Not yet," because she knew breaking something real takes more than one storm. Back on that quiet mountain path, Jack and Tu Tian walked slowly back together, side by side, not holding hands, but not apart, because sometimes love doesn't end, it just becomes something more complicated. And whether it could survive what was coming next was a question still waiting for an answer.